Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Wrigley. I'm the Vice President of ORAC and representing the board on the Associates Committee for ORAC. We have been running ORAC 2.0, which is a series of webinars over the past few months, and they've been very well received and very well attended. Today is episode number 8, and we have a couple of esteemed members of the controls industry with us today, so it's going to be a very interesting and informative session. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to just go over a few things with respect to a sort of Zoom tutorial of sorts. I know most of you are experts in using Zoom these days, and I'm not sure we'll ever go back to in-person meetings after this experience, but just quickly want to touch on a couple of points that are relevant to the webinar for those who are not so familiar with the platform. First of all, ensure that you're logged into the Zoom webinar on either a computer, a smartphone, or a tablet so you can access all the features of the webinar. All attendees in this webinar have been muted to provide the best experience for both the presenters and the viewers. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them in the Q&A box that's available to you. Your questions will then be answered either directly in the Q&A box or verbally by the presenter at the end of the presentation. We also have Amy Carpenter and Jessica Shaver with us today to help with fielding the questions as well as the any technical issues that may arise. At this time, I'd like to introduce our two guest speakers. One is Jerry Salucci from Yorkland Controls, who's been a very good supporter of ORAC over the years and the Associate Committee. Thank you, Jerry, for joining us today.
Welcome.
And Scott McDonald, who is a System Product Sales Representative at Johnson Controls. They'll be speaking to us today about controls and operations in the COVID environment and applications and solutions to address that. This time I'd like to pass the stage over to Jerry, and we'll proceed from there.
Thanks,
Go ahead, Jerry.
Paul. I'll be working, thanks Paul and the ORAC membership for giving both Yorkland and Johnson Controls this opportunity to present to you. So we'll be working from Scott's slides. And what really the intent for today is to look at a particular system that Johnson has and maybe fill in some of the issues that are going on with particularly mid to low light commercial marketplace. So if you go to the next slide, Scott. Scott will follow this a few of these setup slides. So this actual comment was a couple of weeks after COVID, which points to the HVAC and the mechanicals industry as being the most valuable resources when they're looking at a building during a pandemic mode in its operation and pre and post. So if you go next, I've just looked at some of the other sessions that we ran, and we keep updating this guide specification or this working white paper that's on our website. So if you go to yorkland.net, it's on our homepage, you could download this thing. And what we did at the beginning of COVID and had continually updated, and what I have in front of me is some recent information from as early as or as late as September the 11th of this month, that if you look at the what the governing bodies, that's ASHRAE, World Health Organization, CDC, Public Health Ontario, they reference a couple of things related to operating the building and how to mitigate the risk of the spread of the virus or infectious diseases, where the possibility of it that the virus is on these respiratory droplets. So the themes that all these governing bodies group them into are in really 4 categories: ventilation, air changes, how do we increase ventilation, what should we do about ventilation, pressurization, validating that we have and controlling based on negative pressure, humidity, as some other webinars have communicated in the ORAC webinars, that humidity between 40 to 60% actually retards the growth of the virus. And of course, filtering, a lot of talk about filtering and how you could use the HEPA filters. So under that, those 4 buckets, then you have to deal with operations, right? And a lot of the guide resources that we're using look at the scheduling and the ability to change ventilation based on people where they are, and more importantly where they're not, and swing that ventilation pattern to increase the ventilation for the people that are in the occupied areas. We're also seeing recently a lot of demand from landlords, at least we are on our side, and we try to refer them back to the contractors that call us, that the tenants. So if they're in the area where they're working, they want to have, I'm going to call it a peace of mind. They want to have ability to feel comfortable that the landlord is providing all the required safety protocols, from sanitation to ventilation, that gives them a sense of security while they're working. There's also some unique features with respect to remote operations and what that may mean to an HVAC company, and I'll leave that for Scott to kind of embellish with his particular system. A lot of uptake on monitoring validation, again, for not only the landlords, because they're trying to mitigate their risk, but also for the tenants that are in there. All of us are kind of working remotely or limited operation staff. That may also apply to the HVAC ORAC members, where they may not be up to staff, and the people that are working harder to do the work in reactive mode, and hopefully trying to offer some of these ventilation and mitigating features that we're seeing today back into their customer base. Next. This came out September 11th from CDC. Again, referencing HVAC, referencing ASHRAE, that talks about how to manage a building in pre, post, and during pandemic mode. And if you want some resources, that you go to the CDC, just type in HVAC, and you'll get that. It was published September 11th. Good resource. Not much has changed. A lot of it is still relevant. There's still a lot of studies going on with respect to ventilation and HVAC, and where do these droplets end up going. A couple of researches in Alberta are focusing on what's going on in the restaurant environment, where they're even looking at the laminar flow. People that are sitting closer to the discharge air vents seem to have contacted the virus, while those that are within 8 feet apart haven't. So that feeds into all this community documentation that we're continually to update. Next. So when it comes to controls, actually let me step back, because I'm just looking at a document here from the Ontario College of Dentistry just this morning. They published September 11th. And I'm focusing on dentists because I think it applies to what we're trying to do today, which is look at the business use space for a dentist office, right? They tend to be different square footage, tend to be smaller. They're not in heavy duty, light or high commercial building occupancy spaces. And they talk about, when they're with a patient and they're doing cleaning the teeth, okay? And the document that was published looks at the air changes per hour, that based on a certain procedure, what they call the fallow time. What that is when they're cleaning the teeth, after that procedure, they need to follow a table that's published that talks about the dwell time between patients based on that fallow time, and the recommended air changes per hour based on that procedure. Air changes are important. They're starting to document this in serious tables. So how does a dentist, owner of a dentist, make his patients feel comfortable and also and safe, and also their employees? So I'm reading it right now, that dentists should consult an HVAC professional to assess the existing HVAC system and calculate the actual air changes per hour for a dentist practice. Dentists may use the fallow time using table 2. Okay, and if you want more information on that, I'd be happy to send that out. Again, we're talking about light commercial, clear example of where the governing bodies and the associations are referencing ventilation as a key thing. So back to this slide here, when it comes to control system features, right? Whether or not there's an existing automation system or not, the automation system, the control system, whether standalone or automation, should provide some mechanism for monitoring the airflow for validating the indoor air quality, and also for the sake of limited staff, the ability to remotely communicate and validate that for not only the operators, but also the HVAC technicians. Scheduling plays a big factor in it. All these governing bodies talk about purging the building, posting, pre or posting, purging the building. And what do you do after a DEFCON 1 situation where hopefully we never go back into a severe lockout? What do they do with the buildings to make sure that that building is still operating at its minimum level, yet providing an opportunity to quickly go back into partial occupancy mode? Okay. Referencing some of the peace of mind that the tenants are asking for is the ability to visualize and validate for the building occupants. Again, this is mostly in our experience coming from the landlords. Beating that validation down to death, not only for liability reasons, but also peace of mind that the recording and the trending and the alarming features are very, very important. So with that, I asked Scott, and this conversation that I had with Scott is probably 6 weeks old, and looking at a particular system that Johnson offers that I feel fits that marketplace, that we're able to deal with these issues in that light commercial space. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. So you did a great job of talking about both from a global, countrywide, province-wide, even municipal, talking about what's available. Just there is great information on this at ASHRAE.org. And I did put some notes in here on that, but really, Jerry, you've pretty much covered it off. I think filtration, evaluating your system to make sure it has remote access, flush out mode, check your BAS alarms, make sure they're notifying the right people. Consider update your BAS programming to support future things like epidemic mode. And that one, the point at the top there, I think you kind of stress that too. We need to make occupants feel safer. It's a big deal, right? It's people need to feel safe where they work, or they aren't going to come to work, or they're not going to be productive at work. So, the 4 key points here: remote access, increased and better controlled ventilation, better control of humidity, upgraded filtration. Those are kind of the 4 key points that ASHRAE website stresses. So what can we do about that? So Johnson Controls came out with a product called Verasys. I think it's about 3.5 years ago. And it kind of fits into this market, this light commercial or mid-market HVAC market. So this is how Johnson Controls sees that market in North America. 60% of the buildings out there are very well served by full-blown building automation systems like Facility Explorer, like Metasys, that sort of thing. These are systems that can really do anything. But there's about 40% of buildings out there that are really underserved. Those full-blown automation systems would typically be overkill for many of these buildings. So, COVID presents a pretty unique challenge to these buildings because, typically they don't have BAS systems. So this slide basically says this is the share of buildings with building automation in North America. Along the bottom, it's the square footage of the building, and green means they don't really have a BAS system. So there's a pretty big opportunity, you might even say a pretty big hole in that market that may need better control. These buildings have a requirement for a pandemic response, but they might not have the right systems in place. So what's driving this light commercial market? So electronics are getting more powerful and less expensive. Controls are being mounted on equipment at point of manufacture. Everybody has a mobile device now, use it for daily problem solving. And this idea of remote monitoring, even before the pandemic, has become pretty important. People want to see what's going on in their facility. So these are pretty important factors here. So with Verasys, it's a building automation system where intelligent default values are put into it. We're talking about configuration. We're not talking about programming. Because of that, you don't need to be a programmer. You don't have to have software. You don't have to have cables to connect into the system. There's really no control vendor installation labor required. You don't need to be a controls contractor to do this. This product is really well suited for the commercial mechanical contractor that doesn't typically have a controls line. It's a really good fit for this type of company, and that's where we sell most of this product. We've also built in things like fault detection and diagnostics, and of course, remote connectivity into it. Again, those things are important. But I think key here is that really this is not a controls contractor product, and when we show this product to real controls contractors, they tend to not like it because it kind of fits into what these guys are already doing. So what is Verasys? What can we do with it? Constant volume equipment, so it controls rooftop units, VAV systems, VVT or changeover bypass. So really any type of commercial zoning we can do with Verasys. Works great with York stuff, but we probably install more of this on other people's product than we do on York stuff. Use your smartphone to configure it, so you're not dealing with software, you're not dealing with your guys having to have laptops, you're not having to deal with the guy on call not having the tools to go out and investigate a problem where one of these is put in. We're basically using your smartphone, everybody's got one. And I don't like the term plug and play, but it really is a plug and play system. If you wire it up and you tell it it's going to be a changeover bypass or VVT system, when you power it up, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a VVT system. Your installers or your field technicians then need to enter the parameters to make it function effectively, but really there's no real programming involved with this system. It's not your typical BAS. So this is an example of a Metasys system. So there's two layers here. There's the supervisory layer and the application layer. So the application layer is basically, it's a device that does really probably one or two things. It's a VAV box. It's maybe an air handler controller. Then above that, we have a supervisory layer where all of the alarming, trending, scheduling graphics reside, and all of that information from the application layer gets pulled up to the supervisory layer. The good thing about this type of system is it's really flexible. You can make it do anything you want. You can have any type of data visualization, anything like that with this type of system, extremely flexible, but there's a cost involved to it in that it's a very specialized trade almost to do this. Verasys.
Scott, just sorry to interrupt. I believe your audio is just fading in and out. The fact that you're too far from the mic, I just didn't want some of the relevant points to be missed.
Can you? Does this a little better? We did test this before. I don't know. Can you?
Yeah,
guys...
it sounds better, Scott. Sorry, I didn't want to take too much, but just to give you a heads up on that.
No problem. So, and again, let me know if you guys can't hear me, and I'll try to move even closer here. But Verasys is different, right? So it takes that supervisory layer and application layer and flattens them so that everything resides on those controllers. So the York rooftop unit controller or programmable thermostat or the zoning controller is able to do alarming, trending, scheduling, and graphics, and everything is pulled up into the smart building hub, which basically allows you access to those devices. So it's a different way of doing it. It's not as ultimately flexible as the full-blown building automation system, but for the kind of buildings we're talking about, we think it's a really good fit. So what can we do with this? So packaged units, so single zone applications. We have our smart building hub. We'll have thermostats to control unit heaters, fan coil units, rooftop units. Everything resides on the BACnet MSTP bus. If we had something that's more application intensive than maybe just a thermostat could do, we have another controller we can add on, or we can tie in directly to York brand products that have that Simplicity SE board. So you can have up to 100 devices connected to Smart Building Hub. So it can do a big job. You can do up to 100 thermostats, 100 rooftop units if you want to, and access those either directly in the building or through an optional cloud dashboard. We were doing multi-zone applications. We can do that either with York products or third-party products. And generally speaking, we've done a lot more of the third-party products as zoned systems. We do a lot of those. So we can have up to 10 zoned rooftop units. Each one of those rooftop units can have up to 32 damper or VAV boxes. So again, I talk about this being for light commercial or small buildings, but really we could do a pretty big project with Verasys, and really does a good job of mitigating risk. So that Smart Building Hub built-in web server allows you or your field technicians or the end user to log into it and use a PC, a tablet, or phone to get into the system. It's built around HTML5, which means the graphics that you see on your phone will be very similar to the graphics you see on your PC. And then you've got this Ethernet port, so you can plug this into your customer's network if you need to. So, talking about these systems and how this relates to pandemic response. So we've got, our York unit with the Simplicity board, or we've got a thermostat, or we have this application controller that does things like modulating heating and cooling, Title 24 economizer, demand ventilation, humidification, dehumidification control. So, we've got this Tech 3000 thermostat is able to control the outdoor air damper. So that's a feature for that pandemic function. We're coming out with a patch for this thermostat in the next couple of weeks that really addresses the epidemic response. So it's adding some demand ventilation functions to the thermostat, but I think this thing is really pretty valuable, and it'll allow you to set up a epidemic response ventilation, which means we're going to purge the air at least 2 hours, adjustable to higher, before the building becomes occupied. If no schedule is configured but occupancy is detected, air purge will happen once in 24 hours. So it's really a good way to ensure that requirement for ventilation in the building. We also have a wireless version of this. If you look at our smart equipment, our York systems, they're able to control fresh air, fan control, filter control as part of that pandemic preparedness. And that application controller is able to do humidity control, fan control, filters, set point monitoring, fresh air control, all kinds of different things for that. So just as an example, here's the first site we did is a church in Oakville, Ontario, where it's basically a 20-year-old Carrier VVT system that had 3 zoned rooftop units, 2 single zone rooftop units. And they had some ventilation requirements as well. So they had a big exhaust fan that they wanted to run when the church was in session. And it was a very good install. One of the things we're able to do with the zoning portion of this was over in the lower right-hand corner, you can see a rooftop unit there. It serves a daycare center and a gymnasium, which is probably a pretty bad idea for control, because you'll never satisfy the gymnasium. The gymnasium had a vote in the system. So anyway, we were able to really fine tune that Verasys system to make sure that the daycare center, which is a source of income for these folks, were able to be controlled effectively. So that's just one example of a site. I'll just ask maybe Jerry, how am I sounding? Can you folks hear me?
Yes, Scott.
We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. So let's take a look at a Verasys system. I am going to just switch my screen here, and we're going to log into a Verasys site in Milwaukee. Can you see my login screen, Jerry?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
What's the password, Scott?
It is it's right there. Verasys at 1234. Sorry, it was on the previous slide. And this is actually open. If you folks want to check this out yourselves, you can do that. Here is the site. So basically, this is what the end user sees when they log into it. So they're not. We're kind of away from the cutaway of the duct with the spinning fan wheel and loads of data. What we really have here is the building broken down by areas served. So offices or a wing of a building, and the owner or the end user of the building basically gets a really good snapshot of what's going on in their facility. They can see what's calling for heat, what's calling for cooling, what's satisfied, what zone is occupied or unoccupied. And if they want to make a change, let's pick this guy's office here. If they want to make a change to this office, they have really good access to doing that. They have access to pulling and trending for that office. So they can click on that button and take a look at zone temperature. So everything I've shown you folks is really plug and play. There was nobody had to do anything to build these graphics or set up these trends or set up these points. It's all done automatically. So for example, you get a couple of days worth of trending on that office. It's good if there was a complaint from the office, you could go in and maybe validate that there really is a problem there or not. All of that stuff basically comes out of the box. So that's just a quick view of this. For the tenant, this is what they would be looking at. For the technicians, they would probably be on this tab, which basically lists all of the devices, the BACnet addresses, and allows them to go in and configure the site and make changes to how it works. So that's just a quick view of what Verasys looks like. And again, it is there's really no labor involved in setting this up. Once the devices are wired correctly and addressed correctly, that system goes in and pulls all these graphics together for the user. So let's go back. That is you should be back on my presentation here, and that is the address, the user, and the password. So you guys can go in there and take a look around if you want. Try not to break anything. You shouldn't, but sometimes we get some weird stuff uploaded to that. But anyway, and if you have any trouble with that, just send me a quick message and I'll get you folks set up on that. All right. Okay, so what else can we do with Verasys? So one of the things we can do is refrigeration. So through our PEN division, we have an adaptive defrost controller that we can tie into Verasys and control our refrigeration system. So typical box, refrigeration box cooler where we've got loads of features. We can really control any type of system with this, including modulating fan, evaporator control. Got some inputs and outputs to make it so you can alarm if the door is left open, or an emergency switch or a refrigeration leak detector we can tie in here. This defrost controller will then tie into the Verasys system. So looking at things like this Internet of Things for convenience stores, right? So you've got maybe a quick service restaurant or a convenience store where you've got some HVAC, you've got some refrigeration, you're tying it into Verasys. Maybe you want to control some other things in the building. You've got this, call it the I/O module, that'll let you do maybe other things in the building like ventilation, or maybe turn the hot dog cooker off at night, that sort of thing we can do with this I/O module, which is really a pretty powerful tool. So back to the pandemic here, we talked about scheduling, monitoring, trending, and alarming, making sure the building is safe. This is a really good tool for that. So this does that for analog and binary inputs. It also has outputs that you can set up to control other pieces of equipment in the building. So in that church I showed you folks, they had a large exhaust fans they wanted to control. So we were able to put those exhaust fans on a schedule using this controller, but also give the ladies in the office of the church a button they can push to give them 2 hours of ventilation. For example, maybe there's a funeral or an event that's not built into the schedule, makes it really easy for them to operate their building that way. They can just push that button, the ventilation comes on for a predetermined amount of time. We can also monitor an energy meter with this. So it's very low cost. We can have up to 3 energy meters that can look at a piece of equipment or the whole building. So we can do that with this. We can monitor binary inputs. So just as an example, toilet exhaust fans, as per the ASHRAE recommendation. You should be monitoring them. You should be making sure they're actually working. You could do that very easily with this system. You can monitor temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, building pressure. All of these things are things that work really well with this I/O module. And then we can add a schedule to it, like they did in the church. You could schedule the exhaust fans, for example, 100% on in pandemic mode. They cycle with occupancy when the building returns to normal. These are all things you can do with Verasys. You could do them remotely if you needed to. We can also do lighting control with Verasys. And if we have multiple buildings, we can pull Verasys into what we call an enterprise system, an enterprise dashboard that allows you to control multiple buildings from one sign-in screen. So that dashboard is available too. So lots of good things with Verasys. We do zoning. We've got that pandemic update for the thermostats. We can do wireless thermostats, refrigeration, and lighting. Pretty excited about the next version of this, which is coming out next month, which is 4.0. So that gives us that pandemic patch for the thermostat. We've also got a side loop controller that lets us do more advanced control. So let's say we wanted to do outdoor reset on a boiler or on a valve or multiple valves, or do staging of equipment, or really any type of more powerful control. We're going to have a side loop controller. This thing is actually great. So I get asked a lot, will this work with anybody else's equipment? And about a month ago, if you would have asked me, I would say, nope, it only works with Verasys equipment. But we're going to release the ability to do third-party backnet control. So we would, if you had a rooftop unit that had a backnet card on by another manufacturer, we'll be able to pull that into Verasys. If you have other companies building automation controllers that are backnet, we can pull those into Verasys. If you have energy meters, water meters, Any other type of meter in a building that's BACnet, we can pull that into Verasys now. And finally, there's this BACnet IP support. So if you had Verasys in one portion of a building that also had a BACnet IP supervisory controller in it, you now be able to pull that Verasys controller into the larger BACnet IP supervisory controller in the building. So again, it's just becoming, we kind of started off small with Verasys, but it seems like every year we're adding more to it that make it more valuable and useful in these commercial building applications. So just to wrap up here, so Yorkland and Johnson are now hosting limited hands-on training for Verasys. I actually did one yesterday for 2 guys. We can do up to 3 students total. Yorkland has a branch in Hamilton that's really well suited for this type of training because it's a separate facility to the main branch. And Jerry, I think you've done a good job setting up that branch to be safe. There's plexiglass partitions for the students. Typically we do it in half a day, so we're not having lunch typically with these, but they cover the basics up to configuring a changeover bypass controller. It gets the guys started. This would get the guys feeling comfortable with Verasys. So I just kind of like to wrap up with just saying, if you guys have any opportunities or projects you're considering for this, if you have a Yorkland sales rep, give them a call, or feel free to contact Jerry or I, and we can set you folks up with whatever you need. And that's it for me, Paul. I don't know, Jerry, do you have anything else to follow up?
Yeah, so Scott, I would just add that you know, the system is fairly open, the information is fairly transparent. If you go to verasyscontrols.com, you could register yourself and get all the latest and greatest, including that firmware update when it's available. There's really good connection drawings. A question for you, Scott, is, because we've been asked that before, what's the software cost?
Software is no cost because there is no software. So yeah, I probably didn't mention that. So you're not using an app, you're not using software. You're basically using the browser on your phone or tablet or PC to get into the system. So I've actually been selling this type of system for a long time, even from a previous vendor. We had a light commercial system, and it was software based. And if you've got a guy on call, he's got to have the laptop with that software with the right cable to connect into it. We're not doing that anymore. We're basically connecting to that smart building hub locally by Wi-Fi. So we connect our phone to the Wi-Fi signal that thing is generating, and then we just open a browser up and everything is there. So it makes it really easy for, you know, post-sales service or on-call service, that sort of thing. So that's good question. Thanks for asking that. Questions?
So I just have a question in the chat box here. It says, how much trend data can you access for how long of a period?
Yep, it's a very good question. So it's not designed to be a full-blown supervisory controller like you would see in a Facility Explorer type system. So it gives you about, depending on the type of trend, if it's an automatically generated trend, you'll get about 3 days worth of information. So it's really designed to look for troubleshooting information rather than storing long-term trending information. So good question.
So Scott, the other thing I just want to make the point, you know, you mentioned the internet connection. Just to again belabor the point, if I look at this, you know, pet market, which is the dentist's office, right? That you know, they're not very IT savvy, you know. So does this need to sit on the internet for people to see and control what's going on?
So locally, let's say for the dentist or the office administrator, whoever is responsible for the building, they could connect their computer. If they had a PC, they could connect it with Ethernet directly to Verasys and connect to it, or probably more likely, just connect to the Wi-Fi that's coming off it. But if they wanted to put it on their network, they could certainly do that. It would have the same security that you know, our supervisory controller has built into it. It's a very secure device. If they didn't want to, like, and again, putting that on their network would be much like putting a printer on their network. So their IT people would need to get involved with that. Or alternatively, we could put an internet stick on it, so it deals directly with the local cell phone towers rather than the local internet, if there was a concern. So I guess the answer to the question is there's lots of different ways to do it.
So a little plug, sorry, go ahead.
Depending on what the customer wants to achieve.
So a little bit of a commercial for Yorkland. So we have been you know, engaged with Verasys for a number of years. We have a full support staff here that on any immediate job, we've taken first timers, people that were principally had no experience in controls, and after Scott's training, on their first job, we kind of do a high touch. We'll set up the addressing for them if it's a large or a medium-sized VVT or changeover bypass system, or it could be several rooftops connected to the thermostats. We set that all up. They go out there and literally, you know, within a couple of hours, they got something that they're able to see. The contractor's able to see. Typically, the questions come in on a zoning job is because the flexibility of Verasys is to change the demand. So every zone has its own weight that you could potentially start off with. And I got to tell you, after 20 years in this business, I just hated selling VVT systems in the past because you'd almost have to live with a zoning job for a year as it goes through the seasons. And I can put my hand on my heart and say that really, except for maybe 1 out of 10 jobs where it was pretty intense and the air handlers weren't sized properly for the area, we were able to set that up with the contractor and very little callbacks for everybody.
There's another question here from Nikki Ferreira. Nikki, go ahead. Nikki, are you on the line? Nikki, I'm not sure if your microphone maybe is not on, but you're unmuted if you want to type your question in the chat box instead. Okay, while we wait on Nikki, hopefully she can type it in the chat. We can move on to the next slide unless anyone else has a question.
Well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and your expertise for today. It goes without saying that this was a very relevant topic and very well addressed by your presentation. Thank you for your time and expertise. Very well done. And I'll let Amy give you the information on our giveaway.
So we are running 2 giveaways for this episode. All you had to do was register and attend, so you all will be automatically entered to win a $100 gift card of your choice, and there is a runner-up gift card of $25. The winners will be announced tomorrow at 2 p.m. on our social media, so just make sure you follow along on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. I also just wanted to point out that we have an upcoming event called Women Empowering Women in HVAC-R. It's going to be an event focused on women, including educational speakers, ORAC member fireside chats, networking opportunities, and there will be tons of contests and giveaways. There are 2 ticket options for this event, including a digital ticket or a VIP experience box ticket, where we will be sending a bunch of goodies to your door that'll go along with the event. If you are interested in signing up, please do so as soon as you can, as there are limited quantities remaining. I do have the question back from Nikki now in the chat box here. So she's asking, is there not a higher risk to use the stick?
Can you repeat that question, please? It's not a...
Yeah, so Nikki typed, is there not a higher risk using the stick?
So, I guess it would be a cellular hub that's basically, that's actually probably the lowest risk. It would be using, instead of connecting to the building's IT, we're basically connecting to the cellular network, cellular data network. So we're actually, there's really an air gap between the controller and the IT in the building. So that would actually, I think, be the lowest risk of all. So we do have that implemented in bank branches with Verasys, and the banks actually, that's what they would like. Actually, they would just keep the building automation system separate from any of their internal IT stuff. So it's a good question. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending today's session, and encourage you to consider signing up for the Women Empowering Women seminars coming up in late October. Anything else you'd like to add, Amy?
No, not at this point. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Scott, for all your great insight today.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for the opportunity.
No problem.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.